Hey everyone, my name is Zaitsev, and I'm going to talk to you about Redis alternatives, which I think is a very important and interesting topic, as Redis has changed the license earlier this year, and many are looking for alternatives. A bit of introduction for those who you don't know me. I am a database geek and very active open source advocate. I also help to start a number of companies in the open source ecosystem. And if you want to learn more, you can check my LinkedIn profile. So let's talk about the background. Why am I talking about this topic? Well, for last 18 years, I've been involved with Percona, and we are very much focusing on making open source databases run better. And Redis is very commonly used as a supplemental database for database technologies which you support, right? Redis is used with MySQL, with Postgres, MariaDB, sometimes with MariaDB, and so on and so forth. And really, I also admired the project from the early days in terms of how quickly it was able to serve user needs. And at the same time, with the relatively recent Redis Inc. license change, many in the community has been scrambling for alternatives. Let's look at some stats as they relate to Redis. We can see if you look at the databases by the DB Engine rankings, which is very respected in the industry, Redis is in the top 10 of databases. But if you look at the key value databases, Redis is actually the top database. And if you look at the key value open source databases, it really is have a tremendous lead, with Memcached being the second most popular key value database, which is very far. In this talk, we are going to talk about 3 items. The kind of some background for this like Redis drama, if you haven't followed it, how to evaluate alternatives, and then I am going to look very briefly at the major alternatives for Redis which exist at this point. So let's talk about the Redis drama. If you look at the Redis history, the project was started in 2009 by Salvatore Sanfilippo, which is also well known in the community as Antiris. And it was an open source, which is very liberal or permissive license, BSD license. And it just took it a very few short years to overtake Memcached, which was a previous leader as a solution for caching and the key value store. Redis was also one of the technologies that was very quickly supported by Amazon as a database as a service back in 2013. If you look at the Redis limited history, well, it wasn't always called Redis, and the company was not really started by the Redis founders. The company was called Garantia Data and started in 2019 to focus on enterprise Redis. It's later changed name in Redis Labs, as it's gradually changed also the focus to providing Redis in the cloud as a fully managed database as a service, right? Later on, it changed the name in just Redis Limited. What is interesting is there has been quite an interesting change of relationships between their Redis founders and Salvatore and what later became Limited. Back in the early days in 2013, Salvatore actually pushed back to Garantia Data, which was looking to name itself as RedisDB, right? Instead, it was changed to be Redis Labs. Later, though, Salvatore joined Redis labs, where previously it was employed by a variety of companies which sponsors Redis developers. Now, another important change happens in 2018, then Redis actually transferred the trademark and IP to Redis Labs. So since 2018, it was no more Salvatore who owned Redis, but Redis Labs. And then in 2020, Salvatore stepped down from the Redis project to pursue other interests. There have been a lot of things with a license change and Redis too. First, in 2018, Redis championed this commons clause idea, right, to really add some non-competitive conditions to the Apache license. That didn't really got a good response on the market and in community, and they ended up dropping it. But they changed the license to source available license for Redis models in 2019. At the same time, both Redis Labs and Salvatore promised to keep Redis open source forever. Well, and that forever lasted about 5 years, right? And then back in 2024, in March, Redis changed the license for Redis to the non-competitive source available license. Now, you would wonder, why do you change the license? Well, I think it is very similar with a lot of companies those days, is to create monopoly in a database as a service market, because, well, that is the market which is most rewarded with a company valuations and such. You can see a lot of other companies have fully or partly abandoned open source licenses with the same focus. It is interesting, though, just very recently, Elastic has gone back, right? I think feeling the pressure with OpenSearch, and made Elasticsearch again available with open source AGPL license. And it's actually very interesting, right? So we can see what maybe is feeling competition with so many Redis alternatives. Redis will have a change of heart as well. Who knows? Now, why is this concerning? Why is this license change on the database as a service concerning? Well, because this is, for many companies, makes it no different compared to proprietary software. Because many companies simply do not have operation skills to really deploy manually those database technologies. The database as a service, they only is only what they can use. And what that means, well, if there is only one database as a service vendor, you will have a database vendor login, and it may not be very painful initially, but as the time goes and there is more dominance, more login happens, it tends to be more and more severe. In this regard, I like to use this example. Now, for those of you who doesn't know, this good-looking young guy is Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, which in its early days was called RSI. And Oracle was actually a company which was solving people from the dominance and vendor lock-in of a big blue called IBM. Well, as the time goes, of course, Oracle itself is turned into a very hardball playing monopoly, and I think few people would talk now about Oracle as a company which saves them from vendor lock-in, rather than a company which is the vendor lock-in for the database technologies they use. Now, you may wonder, though, if you are not using database as a service or not plan to, does this change really affect you? Well, one thing is you might move to database as a service eventually, right? Many companies are making that decisions. But even if you don't, the change of license reduced contribution to community to Redis project, right? Because now they know only all share the same rights to a project, right? And also there will be reduced alternatives for enterprise support, which you could you could get, because again, you cannot really effectively support software which is not open source, because you cannot, really change it. Now, one question which often arises in relation to the cloud: are cloud vendors free riders? Is it the situation where the main company, Redis, does all the work, right, and others just are free riders? And this is a fantastic stats which shows what actually that is not the case. We can see what the many cloud vendors actually contribute a lot in the Redis project, right? So avoiding free riders, right, at least in the open source contribution sense, was not a problem, right? Probably creating monopoly to get the big part of a revenue cake was. Okay, with all of those shenanigans, what happened? Well, I think fantastic thing with the open source software, no matter who owns it, is what community has the right to fork, and they did exercise it for Reddit. The first fork was Reddit, which did an interesting thing. They not only forked it, but also changed the license to LGPL, which the BSD license allows. The second, I think, and the most important fork we'll talk about was Valkey, because it was supported by the Linux Foundation and many vendors. And I think this is has been not been done before, right? They have been very quickly arranged many vendors which usually compete a lot to work together on Redis alternatives. Look at this example, right? That's a slide from Open Source Summit, as you can see, and we see Google, AWS, and Oracle, right, actually all cooperating on this issue, right? While those companies are often very competing between each other, right? Which I think is fantastic. And yes, Percona is also have joined this effort specifically to make sure Valkey is available on-prem, is and well supported for the companies which will run it this way. Now, I also wanted to talk a bit about the other cases, because Valkey and Redis change is kind of relatively recent, but we have a similar case as before. Now, this comparison of Elastic versus OpenSearch after Elastic did the license change in 2022, right, and an OpenSearch fork was created. What we can see in this case is what their Elastic has been stagnating, while the OpenSearch was growing quite rapidly. Another example is interesting. MongoDB was one of the first databases to do that license change and come up with a non-competitive SSPL license. And we can see, if we compare that to Postgres, at certain time when MongoDB was open source, it was even leading in adoption in their compared to Postgres. But after the license change, and after they have been a very hostile to their community at times, we can see what their PostgreSQL continues to grow, while MongoDB has been stagnating. And we can take a look at the Redis graph as well. We can see what in 2022, then they changed the license for models, and I think a lot of communities understood where the wind is blowing. They have started we could see what they have started to stagnate, right? And that's very likely will continue now. They have a fully changed license, but well, we will see. Now, when this change happened, the project Valkey and Redis were released, I did a poll to get like a fresh take of community. Where do we see the future of Redis? And it was very interesting what, even if a Valkey project had been basically vaporware at that time and had a lot to prove, a lot of people already throw that support beyond that effort. Now let's talk briefly about the alternatives and how should you compare those alternatives which are the most important, which is the most appropriate for your use case? The first one would be the license and availability. And by availability, I mean where is that technology accessible? Some of you say, hey, you know what, we just need it available on Linux, we'll install it ourselves. Some would want that available as a Docker container, maybe on Kubernetes, maybe easily available as database as a service solutions, right, on variety of clouds and so on and so forth. The next one is to think is a governance. If a software is a community governed, then there is a less chance for license changes. Then there is an important thing is community, which is how development happens and also where you can get help, right, or how you can hire experts for this technology. If their technology has a very small community, that becomes hard. Comparability is how it's compatible with the Redis functionality you are using, right? Because not all the tools are able to support every single Redis feature. And finally, commercial support options. If you are using any database technology in a mission critical for mission critical applications, chances are you will be looking for some vendors to provide you support, fully managed options, right, or something like that. With that, let's look at Redis alternatives. We have the couple of types of Redis alternatives. There are some forks of the Redis code base, and also implementations of the Redis protocols which do not use the Redis code base. Redict is the first fork of Redis, which was created in March 2024. As I mentioned, that is the LGPL fork, and it was very fast, but actually I'm not seeing a lot of activity. I think the last blog post and last release was done in April, and really not much things happening. The Volkey is on the other hand, is a leading Redis fork supported by the Linux Foundation. It keeps the same license. It has a lot of vendor support, almost 100 contributors at this point, and the momentum is growing pretty rapidly, right? What is very cool with Volkey is we're not just saying, hey, we're going to support Redis, make sure security bugs are fixed, but they are actually doing some very cool innovation. So, for example, you would see in the last couple of weeks, the blog post was published, which talks about the very cool improvements they are achieving with Volkey 8, right, which is new, which doesn't exist in Redis. Here are a couple of other alternatives to consider. Redka is the Redis protocol implemented on top of SQLite. And if you love SQLite, then you may want to change this to play with this software. It's kind of pretty cool because it also supports transactions, which may be interesting. Another technology is KeyDB, which was built as a faster Redis alternative. And that company was acquired by Snap Inc. And the latest release was made available in October 2023, right? So it's very cool technology, but unfortunately it's not developed a lot. The next one to mention would be Dragonfly, which positions itself as a Redis with wings. It's also focused on performance. It is not really an open source, right? They have a community edition with BSL license, right? But you can check it out, of course. The next one to mention would be Microsoft Garnet. That is also another technology which is not a fork, right? This was implemented from a ground up. It's implemented by Microsoft Research, and it has, some cool architecture the ideas, right, in this case, and also focused on better performance and cluster mode. If you're running in Amazon Cloud, Amazon continues to support Redis and participate in Valky project, right? But they also have sort of like a Redis on steroids, if you will, called the MemoryDB, right? Which positions itself as a durable in-memory database of ultra-fast performance, right? You can check it out. And finally, I want to mention another interesting project. This one is supported by Apache Foundation, another very respected foundation out there, which is a very Redis compatible database, which is using RocksDB as a data store. It supports transactions. It also supports some additional features on the same data, like you can use Redis search and even the SQL queries. It has a pretty large number of contributors, and it's available as an open source project since 2019, right? So um, it is pretty mature. It has Chinese roots, right? So I think it's kind of actually more used than you would think you would see in a Western by its popularity in the Western world, right? So you might want to check it out as well. Well, I think what there are likely more projects to come, being a Redis alternative. Now this opportunity has been created, but even now there are quite a few alternatives to choose from. Now I think we also have a quite clear leader which is emerged, right? I think the Valky has been very successful, getting unprecedented industry support as default Redis replacement, right? But there are some other alternatives, and again, I think that's wonderful because having no choices sucks, and when you have a competition, that creates innovation. That's all I have, and thank you.